This video will demonstrate how you can use Apple Motion to create stereo Final Cut Pro titles for 3840 by 1080 full side-by-side videos, no matter how you collected that, whether from Vision Pro, from an iPhone 15, or from multiple other devices that generate VR180 videos. So this is an overview of how to create a motion project for a stereo Final Cut Pro title, how to create right and left eye views in motion, how to link properties of the two views together, how to create a rig to easily manage stereo text depth, and finally to publish a custom title to Final Cut Pro. So the first thing we have to do is create a project in Motion for a Final Cut title. So we'll go to the New from Project browser and we'll pick out the preset for Final Cut title. Now I've already changed this, but we need to change the resolution to 38 by 40 by 1080. We need to change the aspect ratio to square and the frame rate to 30 frames per second. And so now we'll open a new project. And here is our new project. And the first thing I want to do is some housekeeping. This timeline area underneath here we really don't need. So I'm going to press Command 7 to make that disappear. And I also want to check on the project as well to make sure that we did have the right resolution and pixel squareness and all that. So we'll go to the inspector and look under the properties of the project, and we do have the 38 by 40 by 1080 30 frames per second square. So everything is good. So now we're going to start looking at configuring the project. We'll go to the group, and under the group subheading in the inspector there's an option for fixed resolution, and actually we want to change the fixed width of that to 1920 by 1080, as each eye will be that value, and you can see it changed there. And then we want to go to the properties, and we want to change the position of the X coordinate to move it over, and we'll move it over half of 1920 to 960, and you can see that move that over. So the next thing we're going to look at is the text of that group. So we'll select the text, we'll go to its properties, and we're going to make the XY position for both of them 0 and 0. And then we're going to make the anchor points 0 and 0 as well. Now it doesn't look like we're doing too much there at this point. Now we'll go to the subheading of the text and we'll look at the layout. And I'm not sure what this is for, but we have to change that to type. And then we'll go back to the appearance, and I like the 3D text effect. And then we're going to go look at the format. And most of the Final Cut Pro text titles are impact, so I'll change that to impact. And I'm going to arbitrarily make that size of 204 pixels. And we're going to make the alignment center, and then we're going to go down at the bottom here and type in stereo title. And that's beginning to look a little bit more like what we want to do. So now we're going to go back to the group under layers, and we're going to rename that group, right eye, and it's on the right. We're also going to rename the text as well, and we're going to call that right text. And to make things easier later on, we're going to add a behavior to the right eye. And so we're going to select the right eye. We're going to go to behaviors, and we'll choose basic motion, and we'll add the behavior of fade in and fade out. And as you look at the behavior properties, and you can change that later on, I just leave it as the default parameters. If I had the timeline at 0, you wouldn't see anything. So you make sure that you have it at least in the middle of the 10-second timeline. Now the next thing we're going to do is duplicate the right eye, and so we're going to make a left eye. And so we did that, and it's hard to see here, but the copy is on top, so we're going to drag our right eye above that and then rename the right eye copy. We're going to rename that left eye, and we're going to do the same thing for the text. We're going to rename that as left text. So now it doesn't look like we've really done anything, so we have to move that left eye group, and going over to the inspector properties, we'll move that to a minus 960, and now we'll see both the right and left eye representation on the stereo video. So really both eyes are set up at this point, and all the work left to be done will be actually on the left eye interacting with the right eye. So we're going to link the left eye to the right eye first, and then the first thing we're going to do is select the text. And now we're going to add a behavior, and the behavior is a parameter link, and then that will appear here on the left, and we'll activate the link. Now the first thing we have to look at is the source object, and that will be the right eye and the right eye text. The source parameter we really can't get to yet until we apply it to a target parameter, and then we're going to look at the position in every aspect of the right eye. And now we can go back to the source parameter and link that to the position of the right eye. So now that's linked. I don't touch with any of the other aspects here. And if I come over and click on the right title, I can move that around, and I'm going to name that link to position. And now we're really going to do the same thing for scale text. So we're going to do the same thing with scale. We're selected on the left text. We're going to add a behavior, and the parameter will be link again, and then we'll have the link box activated. Our source object will again be the right eye text, and we're going to apply that to the transform property of scale, and again all. And we go back to the right eye properties, transform, scale, all, and I'll rename that scale, And now I'll select the right eye title, and I will change the scale. And if I hold the shift key down, it remains proportional. And notice that if the title leaves the eye group, it's cut off. So we'll do the same thing again now with the text parameter, and we'll add a behavior, and the parameter is link again. The link will appear over here. Our source object is again the right eye text, and for the apply to, we'll look at the object and look at text, and we'll do the same object text from the right eye. And if we click on the right eye now, and I'll change the text to test, and you can see that that changes as well. And I want to go back and rename the link to text. And now we're going to go on to actually create the rig. So we're going to create a rig which will make it possible to add two different parameters for the Final Cut Pro user, but control both of those with one we'll call widget. And so to make the rig, we'll go to the project, and we'll add an object, and it'll be called a rig. And it's got a little control stick icon there. And so now we've added a rig, and we have choices between a slider or a pop-up or a checkbox. And we'll fill these with snapshots of the state of those parameters. So we're going to choose a slider, and now we need to add parameters to the slider. And the first thing I want to do is add the scale parameter. So when the text is going to be farther away from the Final Cut Pro user, it'll look smaller, and when the text is closer, it will look larger. So now we're going to look at the right text, and we're going to look at the scale parameter over here in Properties. And if I pull this drop-down menu down, we can add that parameter to the rig, and there's the rig we just added. And so we're going to add that to the slider. And if we look at the rig now, you can see the right text scale is included as a parameter. The next parameter is the most important, and this is the offset of the right text. The offset is important because everything as far as the text coming closer to the user or going farther away is dependent on the distance between the right and left text relative to their center or to their original position. As the text gets closer together, it will get closer to the viewer and will literally pop out of the screen. And if they get farther apart, the text will sink into the screen. So we're going to select the left text link position, and I'm going to move that up just so we can see it easier. And so as you see here, we have an X offset, and we're going to then add that to the rig like we did before, and we'll add it to the slider. You can't add the offset to the right text because, again, the right text determines where the left text is, and if you offset the right text, it will also move the left text. So we're lucky to be able to find this X offset for the left side. Now we'll look at our slider again, And now we have the two parameters, the left text offset parameter and the scale parameter. So if we look at the slider, if we move the slider, really nothing happens. But you can see in the parameters below that they're both set for 0 and 100%. So what we need to do is assign a value to each one of these snapshot tags. But before I do that, I want to change the units of the slider, and for purposes I'll describe later, I want to change the bottom one to minus 160, the minimum, and the maximum to be 160. And now you can see the readout up here. As I go from one to the other, it goes smoothly and it interpolates between those two values. So if I want the text to be farther away, I want the offset between the two stereo titles to be farther. I want the offset to be greater, or those to be farther away. We can do that by having the left text be offset in a negative way, and I'm going to make that minus 160. And then if we look at the other parameter, we're going to make the scale to a minimum of, well, I'll just type it in, 15%. And so for this snapshot tag, it's going to be offset a minus 160, and we'll move it to the left, make the offset greater, and make the scale only 15%. Now let's go to the other tag, and that will mean that we want it to get closer, so we want the offset to be closer. So we're going to move the left text 160 degrees on the x-axis, and we're going to make the scale arbitrarily 200%. And again, you can see that when it crosses the boundary, the group text boundary, it gets cut off. So now we've set two snapshots. The first one is minus 160 with a scale of 12%, and I don't know why it changed. And then another one, it moves close. They move closer together with an offset of 160 and 200% increased. Now the reason I chose 160 is if you go with a 1920 pixel width view on each eye, if you move it by too much, you'll cause eye strain and make your eyes pop out. So, but what I'd really like to do with this slider is have a default position where there's no effect from either parameter. So I'm going to enter 0, and the slider goes to somewhere approximating 0 on between minus 160 and 160. And I'm going to double click, and that came pretty close, so that's actually minus 0.35. And for that value, I want there to be no offset and for the scale to be at 100%. Now if I go look at the right to make things closer, again you can see that the offset is right, and I go on to the left, the offset moves things farther away and makes it 12%. So we basically have the rig set up, but before we publish it, I want the default to be no changes in the parameters, the original state. So now we'll go to the rig, and we'll come down here and publish the rig. And now if we look at the project, we can, even though it doesn't say 0, we can see the slider that will be published in Final Cut Pro. And if I move the slider, the text gets smaller, and actually you can't see it, but the offset is being made, and then it goes up to 160. So that's really exactly where we wanted it. Well, oops, before I actually publish the rig, I want to change the name of the slider from slider to something more reasonable. So I'll go to the layers, and I'll double click slider, and I'm going to type in farther to closer. And now I can go to the rig and publish the rig, and then I can save it. But before we go to Final Cut Pro, we need to save our project. Right now it's labeled untitled, and actually during this project you'd be saving it every 5 minutes or so. So let's go to Motion, Save As, and the template name, we'll call it Stereo Title. We'll put it in a category My 3D Titles. Now I created My 3D Titles using the Finder where Final Cut Pro stores the motion templates, and so we'll put it there and we'll publish it. So now we're in Final Cut Pro, and under the titles section, there's my 3D titles, and there's the 3D title that we just made. So I'm going to just double click on it and bring it down to the video below. Now you notice there's nothing there yet because that's part of the fade in, fade out. So I'll just put it in the middle here, and then we can look at the published parameters up in the right, and there's our farther and closer. Now for just this one title, we can make it farther away, and the offset is making the offset distance greater, or we can make it closer with the scale making it bigger and the offset decreasing. So if we take these clips and copy a few and look at this one, for instance, then we can grab the right title. Now we cannot do anything with the left title, but we'll go over here to the right, so we'll move the right title and literally put it anywhere we want, in the middle or wherever. The other thing you can do with this title is under the titles here, and if there is no selection of the text in the video, you can actually change the font of both titles at once. And so there's all kinds of things that you can do. You can change the alignment, the depth of 3D, so all the things that you can normally do in Final Cut Pro with text you can do here. So really the rest is up to you, and the fact that in this demonstration we tied 2 parameters to one slider, you could have just as easily had one slider for the offset and one slider for the scale, and do it exactly, rather than what I kind of cooked into the slider. I hope that helps, and the possibility of you doing other things with this is unlimited.